Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 45th episode of Disability Discrimination Banned Starting Now. I am your host, Lindsay, and in the last few years, police officers have been a big topic of conversation. And I know many of you are probably thinking right now, Lindsay, what does disability discrimination have to do with police officers? But let me continue to explain because it might make sense. As we all know, there are a lot of jobs that the police officers do, like staying in the station, doing paperwork, which probably is not fun, to going out into their communities to keep people safe. If there is anyone that has actually not seen anything, not met an officer, but want to see exactly what they do in the field, then I'm going to give the show a promotion, you could say. I highly suggest watching the real show on Patrol Live. It's a show that is 3 hours long, and you basically get to watch the officers do their everyday jobs, just adding cameras into the mix. And I guarantee you that when you see the officers doing the dangerous things, the simplest things, you will have a greater appreciation for them. So, with today's guest, we will be talking about how police interact with a person who has a disability or limitation. The guest that I am having was a police officer for 24 and a half years at Tulsa Police Department. During that time, when he became a guest host of Live PD and on Patrol Live, and he very quickly became a fan favorite. And if you hear him talk, then you'll understand why. After he retired a few years ago from the Tulsa Police Department, he is now hosting a show called on Fox Nation called Crime Cam 24/7. Well, please help me welcome to the show Sean Sticks Larkin. Welcome to the show, Sticks.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. It's something you and I have messaged back and forth with about trying to do for quite some time. So I'm glad that we were able to get this lined up. And a huge thank you, of course, to our, someone that's a friend of both of us, Mike Eckert, for making that connection. So big thank you to him.
Yeah. If anyone's wondering how I kind of met Mike and Sticks, is if Mike is a college buddy of my uncle's. And there was one day, or he had to come down here for, I believe, a funeral. And my uncle told me, oh, yeah, he works with Sean Sticks Larkin. He was like, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Well, the next day, Mike ended up FaceTiming Sticks while you were actually at work, I believe.
Yeah, I think I was.
Mike is basically our communications person.
He has. He is. Yes, he has. He has helped both of us out to make sure we get one another connected.
So, of course, I know a little bit about you, but for the listeners that have never heard your name before, can you tell them a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my name is Sean Larkin. My nickname is Sticks, and it's a work-related nickname that's carried on into television now. But everybody that knows me in my personal life, everybody just calls me Sean. So, but I answer to both, absolutely. I grew up in California, up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and moved out to Oklahoma when I started college, and had planned on going back to be a cop on the West Coast. I actually ended up meeting Mike Eckert and another guy named Luke Sherman when I was doing my internship in college. And I started riding around with those two guys. They were partners together. And so that kind of got my foot in the door for Tulsa Police Department. And kind of when I finished up school, they ended up hiring me right away, and the rest is history. So I've been in Tulsa. I started as a Tulsa police officer in January of 1997, and I retired in May of 2021. Very fortunate during my time there to work with a lot of good officers. I worked as a patrol officer. I worked in a unit that we had called Footbeat, another one we had called Street Crimes. I'd spent 1 year in our major crimes homicide unit. I, ended up promoting up the rank up to the rank of sergeant. Was a patrol sergeant, a narcotics sergeant, and I was the gang unit sergeant for about the last 13, 14 years of my career, 13 or something like that. So that was kind of where my heart was always at, even as an officer, was dealing with the street gang. So I was happy to be there as long as I was.
What unit did you and Mike work in
Uh,
together?
so when I did my internship riding with those guys, they were in a unit that's called Footbeat. And basically they worked the housing projects. Again, this is back in the mid '90s, and when street gangs were very, very, very active, crack cocaine sales and like the violence that comes along with. And those guys, they were very active officers. And Mike was young, Luke was young, and I was even younger, but I got to ride with them and see how they kind of did things. And then Mike and I, we were on the SWAT team together I was on the team for 7 years. He was on there for much longer than me. And he actually, I think still to this day, he's the commander over the SWAT team. He's the head guy in charge of it. So we were together on the SWAT team for 7 years.
Oh, wow. So you just answered number two, what units you were in, but what made you want to become a officer in the first place?
So I come from a military family. My dad was in the military for 32 years, and my mom was actually in for 20 herself. And so I kind of just grew up in I don't know if I'd use the word regimented, but kind of structured lifestyle. My parents were kind of that way, and they weren't like super, on me. I mean, we weren't raised like, we were in the military, but just that type of structure I was just used to my whole life. And growing up where I grew up out there in California, I saw, a lot of guys get in trouble. A lot of my friends got in trouble, and I hung around them, but I was always just that much, smarter to not put myself in a position to get in trouble. And so I kind of grew up around it. And I think since about my junior year of high school, I knew that I wanted to be a police officer, and that's what I went to college for. And I was fortunate to get hired just after turning 23 years old, and stayed there for a very long time.
You were 23 when Tulsa hired you?
I was, yeah. So I had actually turned 23 in December of 1996, and the academy started. Actually, I think it was 30 days. I think my hire date was January 6th, if I remember correctly. Was the date we started the academy, and I had turned 23 in December. So
Wow.
young, 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 and there's a lot of discussion about what age someone should be to be a police officer. I mean, that's young for sure. But it depends on the individual. I think there are some people that young that can handle the job, and there's others they need to wait, several years longer. So they have a little more maturity and experience in life.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to see what ages people
Hmm.
go into the police academy. Is that what?
Yeah, yeah. No, we had three people in my police academy, I think, that were all 38 years old. And so you had 38-year olds and 22, 23-year olds, and just, people that, I mean, one of the guys, he had been in the army for 20 years, and he left the army and then joined the police department. So, that was a guy that already had a full 20-year career. He was married, had kids, and been around the world. And here I was, a 23-year-old kid with, I worked at a grocery store beforehand. So we just, very different experiences, but still there for the same job.
Yeah. So you retired back in 2021. Am
Yes,
I
ma'am.
got the right year? Okay.
Yep.
So I mentioned that you have a show on Fox Nation that I absolutely love.
Thank you.
Watch it. What other projects have you been working on?
Since the whole TV thing was just pure luck. I wasn't trying to get into TV. I never had any desire to be, in media or anything like that. So first started out with Live PD. There were some spin-off shows that used to be on A&E television. There were some spin-off shows that I did. One there was called um,
PD Cam.
PD Cam. Yep, PD Cam. I think I was trying to think of the right name. PD Cam. So I hosted that show. I did a show for one of the car networks about the top 10 police cars. I did some guest appearances on America's Top Dog, which was a television show that featured civilian dogs competing against police dogs. I was on a tattoo show, and so I got to,
Oh,
lots of
I
experience.
saw that one.
Yeah, lots of experience doing, a couple different shows, and then that kind of spun off into me getting to do news stuff. So I'd appear on the news show speaking about things in policing that were happening across the country. And then on patrol live, that's on the Reels channel, and then now Crime Cam with Fox Nation. And I appreciate you saying that you love that show. We actually just the show got renewed, so we're going to make 20 more episodes here starting very soon. So I think those will be out
Did you
probably
just find that out?
I just found that out maybe 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, we just found that out. So we'll make 20 more shows, and if people keep liking them and people keep watching, we'll keep making more. And those should come out probably springtime, early summer, something like that. We'll start filming in January for it. But I've had a podcast that I had
Is that
myself.
still going?
It's not. No, no, no. Just with a busy schedule. The guy that I did the podcast with, his name was Howard. He's a traveling nurse, and he ended up taking a job for a while up in Oregon, and so we had fun with it. And we had a contract to do a certain number of episodes, and we did it. And I'm glad it's something that we did together.
Well, I loved listening to that. And if Dan listens to this episode, why in the world did he not like the name cocktails and
Hey,
cocktails?
every single person that we have talked to, minus him or one of the attorneys that has, there at his office, they didn't like it either. But it's kind of funny that the podcast did well and everybody loved the name, and so they later admitted, like, okay, it was a good name. So yeah, it was pretty funny. But I loved it. I thought it was great. When I give we gave Dan a hard time about it. He and I are very close personal friends, and we stuck to the name, and Howard and we came up with the name like the first day we started talking about doing a podcast. We had that name, and we're like, this is great, and we would not give it up no matter what.
Oh,
Your podcast is great too. I love it. The name of it's fantastic.
well, thank you. And I don't think Dan not liking the name is ever gonna go away. I think everyone's gonna
Have to
keep
let them know. That's right.
him. Um, so Live BD was canceled back in 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
Of course, I'm not gonna say the reason, but it's for the reason they canceled it. Um, what was your reaction to that news, and why do you think it is important to have shows like On Patrol and Cops on?
Yeah, I was very disappointed, obviously, about it. I think I know every single person that worked on that show was disappointed. It was a show, or a product they were all very proud to be a part of. And a lot of the people, the public, what they don't know or understand is, yes, they see the three of us that were on the set all the time, but there's about 100 people involved in making that show every night. from everybody that's there at the studio with us to the sound people to the camera crews that are out doing it. So there's a lot of people that are involved in it. And the show was obviously very successful. I mean, it was, like one of the highest rated cable television show on Friday nights. But when it was canceled, and all this, the talk about policing came to the forefront of news and people, attacking it and saying things like that. Live PD or a show like On Patrol Live, what they do is just document the officers working. That's all they're doing. They're just showing this is what the calls are going to, this is the traffic stops they're making, and here's the police officers doing their job. And so, in my personal opinion, that when the show was canceled, I think that there was a missed opportunity that they could have, the network that it was on, A&E, could have said out publicly, hey, policing is the number one topic right now being talked about across the country. Tune in, watch the only show that lets you watch it live from the comfort of your home. And, judge for yourself, basically. And so, yeah, it was very, very disappointing. I kept thinking surely it's going to come back, and it never came back with A&E as live PD, and Reels ended up kind of creating this other show called On Patrol Live, and now that's back out there, and I'm happy that people get to see police officers at work.
And I keep mentioning Dan, but I
Yeah.
know he was at the forefront of we're gonna bring this show back.
Yes,
And
it was very,
so,
it was, yeah, no, it was very, very important to him because, Dan's got a news background. His whole life, he's been involved in news, and he knows a show like that is, important. It's been, well, it's beneficial, yes, but it's just important that the public sees what is going on. Not just, the police officers, they just get to see what society is doing and why police officers, have to react the way they do or how they react to things that are happening out there. It's just very important because the news or somebody on social media, they, there's a lot of terrible things that are said about police officers at times. And a lot of times they don't have the facts, or it's a small version of what really happened. And a show like that, you get to see the full story yourself.
yeah, and you have actually, so Dan works for News Nation,
Correct.
the only network I will watch on
Yeah,
it.
that's very good too. They do a great job on there.
And so not only have you been a guest on his episodes, especially when it comes to the police,
Hmm.
but he does an amazing job, not only hosting On Patrol, but telling the news. Because
Yeah.
however he says it, I completely understand, and I don't understand the news sometimes.
Well, I think what Dan is really good about, he's very honest, and doesn't matter what side of the political side somebody's on, any of that type of stuff, whether it be race, religion, sexual orientation, none of that matters. It's a matter of right or wrong, or is someone being hypocritical? And so he just calls it out, and he's very neutral in these type of things, and it's something that you just don't see too often in news.
No, not at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
So, like we mentioned earlier, you go through training when you want to become a police officer.
right.
And before I emailed you, I had actually texted Mike because I text him back and forth
Hmm.
sometimes, like just to see how he's doing. And I had asked him, like, do they train you guys to on how to work with people with disabilities? And he said they do because those people with limitations are usually the people you're coming into contact with. And oh, go ahead.
No, no, go right ahead. Yeah.
And so of course, you went through that training. What is the most important thing that they told you?
As far as dealing with people with disabilities, or just
Told you to do if you interact with someone who has a limitation.
yeah, so our police academy is 6 months, long, and so that's the classroom. That's learning how to drive police cars, the shooting, the law, the fighting, all that type of stuff. You do that throughout the whole academy. And one of the biggest things we do throughout that time is mental health types of stuff. And I can't speak for every state because I just don't know factually, but I assume every single state has a mandatory number of hours, both in the police academy and each year, that officers have to do. So I know in Tulsa Police Department, I think we doubled the number of hours that are required by the state of Oklahoma for hours for training. And every single year, we have what's called a mental health update. And sometimes it's taught in classroom at our academy, like we might have somebody from one of our behavioral mental health places in Tulsa that comes and teach. Other times it's done maybe through a PowerPoint that we can do at our office. And it's something, I know we do annually. And it's kind of like as you mentioned that Mike, mentioned we come in contact with a lot of people with disabilities or mental health, crisis situations. And so it's basically what we call active listening, is the term that's used is, listening to what this person is expressing or, trying to tell you so you can get an idea of what they're dealing with or, you know, uh, things that are upsetting them and why you're there. And sometimes it's hard, but it's also hard talking to anybody else sometimes that's having a tough situation. So it's just more than anything is being what we call an active listener, trying to listen and being patient, so you can try to figure out how you can help that person.
Oh, that's I like I like that. And I've seen, of course, on patrol, some of the officers do have to be doing active listening as I'm
Hmm.
watching them.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's the great part about the show. People get to see it, see it happening.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, there are different types of disabilities in the world and that police officers see. And there are some people that do have seizure disorders,
Hmm.
epilepsy, seizures. So to uh to everyone listening, a person with a disability is not required to disclose their disability
Right.
to to the officer. But if you when someone has a seizure disorder, usually the lights will almost start a seizure, you could
Hmm.
say.
Yep,
So
that
if
could happen.
the person tells you I don't know what you see in their chart when you look them up, but
Hmm.
if it says like seizure disorder, do you turn the lights off or
No, so it's pretty much every, I can speak again for Tulsa. We don't have any type of chart, that pops up when we run somebody's record. Now, we do have, if there's been what we call flagged or noted in the system, if somebody does have, mental health issues, then that can be flagged in there. And that's basically all. It doesn't even tell you what it's for. All we do is get notified potential mental health issues. It's a little thing that pops up in the computer. But each one of those situations, honestly, just like any car stop, any call that an officer goes to on anything, it's always just each situation is different. So if an officer's on a call, and it's going to depend on who the officer is, and some of the stuff you see, like on, whether it be live PD or on patrol, there's some officers who are very friendly and understanding, and there's others who are very strict and rough, and they're just not that way.
straightforward?
Yeah, very straightforward. And so, if somebody's, expresses, hey, I have, I can have seizures from just emergency lights like this. Would you mind turning them off? the officer may or may not do it, But, and only say that we also have people that lie to us a lot. And so there could be someone who's saying something and then, they just want to take advantage of something. So, again, it just comes down to each situation the officer is involved in.
I would be so frustrated if someone did not tell me the truth.
Yes,
So
it happens a lot,
especially
unfortunately.
with disabilities, because if you're faking one, I have a disability myself.
Hmm.
Everyone knows it.
Hmm.
If you make a joke or if you lie about a disability, then thank goodness I'm not an officer because
Yep.
I
It's
would not
offensive.
I would
Yeah.
not be nice at that point. So
No, it is. It's
I'm
very
gonna
offensive.
I'm gonna let Mike handle the police duties.
Smart.
So everyone knows there are canine dogs in
Hmm.
each department, and I am so fascinated by those types of units. I think seeing canines, you can do more with the dog than you think you can.
Sure.
And so I'm assuming they don't do this because of the comprehensive training to do drug busts to take down the bad people. But if there's a situation where a person with a disability is like freaking out, having a meltdown, um, if even if a canine unit responds to these type of calls, will they bring the dog out to calm them down, or do they just stay in the car and the officer use different uh
you know, they're most likely going to do other situations. I know in Tulsa Police Department, we have officers that we call MHROs, which is a mental health response officer. So they're actual police officers on the department that have regular, job, whatever they're doing, but they've had additional training beyond what the regular patrol officer has. So we can call, them out just because they have some more skills that they can deal with somebody having in crisis like that. Or we even have civilian groups that we can call out. The dogs, I know there are some departments that have the terms
there?
therapy dog. Yeah, they have something like that. That they can, bring out or that they'll use, especially at public events. The majority of the police canines, they're I'm gonna use quote unquote they're working dogs, and so they are used for sniffing out narcotics or, as you mentioned, tracking down suspects and apprehending guys. And in Tulsa, we have quite a few canines here, and the most of ours are all dual dogs. They both are trained for sniffing out narcotics, but also tracking down and apprehending suspects. And when I say apprehend, they apprehend with their mouth. They bite. And so I know that even myself as an officer, I didn't like to be around those dogs because they're trained to bite people and they get rewarded for it. So I didn't want them to ever bite me thinking, oh, there's a person. I should be biting this person. So to answer your question, again, I can't answer for every police dog that's out there, but I know the majority of them probably won't bring their dog out around somebody, especially somebody that's upset. If it's a type of dog that's used to tracking down people, they probably won't bring them around somebody that's upset because the dog will think, oh, this is my job, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And I want to tell everyone, if you want to avoid contact with the canine, please listen to what the officers
Yeah.
are telling you, because every time, I'm not sure if there's any canine units being followed on patrol right now, but
Okay.
whenever I would hear those dogs bark, and I'm in bed, keep that in mind. I straighten up myself.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't want to hear the bark. I don't. And my dog even barks back at them. So,
I know that's very common for the show. A lot of people on Twitter during the show, like to post videos or pictures of their dogs barking or, at the other dogs, the canine dogs at work. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Don't People don't do anything to hear the bark or get chased. Just
Yeah,
listen.
don't commit crimes. That's the first
Yeah.
part. Don't commit
Don't
crime, and then don't run from the police.
Yeah, please do not. It honestly stresses me out when I see that on the show.
Oh yeah,
Like, buddy, if there's a canine there,
you're in
it's
trouble.
not going to be good for you. So I am assuming with your career in policing, you pulled someone over with a mental health issue or a disability.
Hmm.
Um, of course, like I said, they can get overwhelmed in certain situations. So
Sure.
what type of approach would when you figured out they probably have a disability, what type of approach would you take to make sure they're comfortable?
I just would try to, explain to them, one, what was my reason for stopping them? Why did I have contact with them? And, if they were upset, worried that they were going to get in trouble or something like that, I would explain to them, hey, hey, this is no big deal. I'm just letting you know that, your brake light's out or you're going a couple miles over the speed limit and things like that. And I think, this applies to most police officers when dealing with anybody. We're not out there trying to make somebody's life miserable. That's not what we're there for. And, you know, I think that's an opportunity for us when we have contact with anybody at all, and especially somebody who easily gets upset like that or, has a mental health issue or disability, to calmly talk them through what's going on. Um, Come to a level where they understand what's happened and why we're doing what we're doing, and let them then leave and hopefully feel better about, oh man, if I ever have to deal with a police officer again, I know this is what it's like, and I shouldn't have to worry about this type of thing. So, and there's been other times, like if we've needed to contact a family member or something like that because somebody might be better at, whether it's believing or just listening to somebody in their own family about what's going on, as opposed to a police officer because they're scared. We've even done that before.
Yeah, so like everyone's heard us talk about, I think it's very important to talk about police, especially within recent years, what kind of light they are in right
Sure.
now. And I'm referring to Mike. Mike does not have a mean bone in his body.
No, he does not.
He does not. But I want people to understand that when you take, I'm not sure if you call it oath, but when you take that oath to be a police officer in Tulsa, Oklahoma, then the officer is going to do what they have to do to protect their city, protect their dog if they're a canine unit,
Right.
protect their coworkers.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. Our the oath. It's a little bit long, I guess, but in the end of it, you basically say, I'm going to protect the rights, lives, of the citizens of Tulsa with my life if need be. And, that is, it's a very serious oath that you take. But the biggest thing is police officers are regular people. They're regular people that just, they have a job that requires them to carry a uniform, wear a uniform, I'm sorry, carry a gun. And they have a lot of, there's a lot of responsibility that they have. So sometimes there's cops that have bad days, because something's going on at home and they come to work with a bad attitude. But that's just human nature, unfortunately. And, police officers just have a lot of contacts with people. But just like as you mentioned, Mike, that guy's one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he's been that way. I've known him for, gosh, going, 28 years, 27 years, whatever it is now, something like that. And he's been that way since day one. He's never changed. He doesn't, depending on who he's around, he doesn't change up and down. He's very, you know, consistent like that. But we do have a job to do, and there's times out there that we have to be very firm and assertive and, elevate our voice and our attitude and things like that as well. But the vast majority of the time, that is based off of the person we're dealing with, how they're acting, which, it can go up or down based on that. So,
So if you had someone come up to you like saying police officers are bad, blah blah
mhm.
blah, what would you say to them that it's better to back the blue, not hurting the blue?
Most of the people, if they say something like that, I tell them, hey, we're hiring. If you think you can do it better, come on. We're hiring. You know,
Okay.
yeah, it's like, hey, we're hiring. You want to do it? You can do this job better, or you want to, see what it's really like. Come do it. But and I'm talking about that's with when I'm talking about bad guys that usually don't like the police or something like that. And most of the bad guys, they don't take it too personal. And I'm talking like real bad guys. They know they're doing their job, which is committing crimes, and we're doing our job, which is trying to catch and stop them. I mean, that's just it. But the protests and things like that that have happened in the last couple of years, that people who have never even dealt with a police officer yet dislike the police, they have these bad things to say. And I think it's just a lot of misinformed or uninformed people that have no idea. They don't know what the statistics really are for interactions, that are good to bad. And I encourage people, hey, listen, whether you like the police or not, go out and do a ride along, ride with the police officer, in your city where you work, where you live at, and you will see what the police officer deals with every night. You'll hear all the calls that go on the radio, and you'll kind of get an idea. And even going back to like On Patrol Live, it's an eye opener. There's been a lot of people who have said to me through the years they did not like the police, and then they watch that show and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, you know, how people talk to you every single day and stuff like that. So now don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that are fantastic to the police as well, but people just need to see.
And one thing that you had said was police are like everyday human beings. And you of course know this because Mike texted you this. But back in May, I did a little goodie bag project to thank my
Police.
police. And one of the things I added was a note, and I actually rewrote that note to all police departments in America.
That's
So
fantastic.
I am actually, before I ask the next question, I'm gonna read it real quick.
Okay.
So, dear all police departments in America, I want to say thank you for all you do. From the support staff to the police officers and the canine dogs that help during situations that the officers are dealing with, especially the scary ones where canines have to get involved.
Yes.
Um, on Friday and Saturday nights, I watch a show called On Patrol Live for 3 hours. I see the work that all the police do on the departments that are featured, but I also know that other departments that are not featured are dealing with the same situations, probably right at that moment. Please know that all of your actions that you do on a daily basis do not go unnoticed. Sticks and I, along with the rest of America, appreciate for what you do in your communities, whether it's support staff or the officers that go out into the cities to keep people safe. No matter what happens, you will always have a group of supporters behind you. Love you, Blue. Lindsay.
That's fantastic. And like I said, the last couple of years, it's been very tough for this profession. And so letters like that, or even somebody just saying, hey, thank you, appreciate what you do. It means a lot. And there's even, there's citizens, and I've had it happen to me before, is like you're sitting in a restaurant with another officers eating. and it comes time for your bill, and the waiter or the waitress just tells you, "Hey, an anonymous citizen in the restaurant paid for your dinner tonight." So things like that. And I said what you did for your those officers there in your area, it means a lot.
And the assistant chief actually said nothing like they've gotten nothing like that
That
before.
that's
So,
fantastic. I love hearing it.
so what do you hope that the listeners will take away from our conversation?
Um, just obviously how important, having law and order is and police officers, for anybody that may not think we need them, but just to understand, kind of like what I said a few minutes ago, that the men and women that are police officers across the country, whether they're police officers in a city, whether they work for a sheriff's department or they're troopers or anything like that, we are regular men and women and that have a tough job, and we have all the same problems that other people at home. There's officers that struggle financially to pay their bills. There's officers that are, having domestic problems. They're not getting along with their spouse, or their kids are not getting along with one another or them. There's officers that have, substance abuse problems. There's drinking and drugs, unfortunately, that happens. And so it's just where people have mental health problems. I mean, I know we've had officers from my own department that have had mental health crisis and things they have to deal with. So it's just tough, and just try to understand that, hey, we're you know regular people. We're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect, just like nobody else is out there. And the majority of the police officers are doing a really, really good job. And right now they're severely understaffed across the country. So just, try to be open minded when dealing with an officer, and hopefully the officer is doing the same thing back to the citizen.
And this is honestly my favorite question to ask everyone. What would you say to your younger self?
Um, I've been very, very fortunate in my life. Still fortunate to this day of how, what's going on in my life and the people that are in it, and things like that. So it's just, not just to my younger self. I try to tell this to anybody, as a bit of advice, especially younger people. One, there's going to be highs and lows throughout life, but the vast majority of it is kind of in the middle. It's peaks and valleys, and a lot of everyday things contribute, um, effort. Basically, it takes consistent, regular effort to physically take care of yourself, to have financial stability, to have good relationships with friends or your loved ones and your kids. But something I like to, tell to my own kids and other people, and something I wish I did know when I was younger, because it does help out with some problems, is just in life, you're going to have a lot of associates, but very few true friends. Because there's people that you think are very, they're good friends, and then they stab you in the back, or, they leave, or whatever it may be. And that hurts. But if you can, you understand that most of your people are just kind of acquaintances, and not true friends, it makes things a little easier to take in when something happens like that.
Well, Sean, thank you for so much. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast,
My pleasure.
especially when you have a jam-packed schedule.
It's a
And
little better nowadays. That's why I got this little beard growing out, growing some hair here. So it's taking this time off's been very nice, but it's still got things going. Yes.
the conversation we had is very important, like to you, me, Dan, of
Hmm.
course, Curtis, who is the other guest host of On Patrol.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, but I have loved all the guests that I have had on.
Good. Yeah.
You are my top 10.
Well, thank you. I'll take it. Hey, I'll take it.
And everyone, thank you for listening to episode 45. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye,
Before
guys.
before you hit stop, I will say this. I've done a lot of podcasts and you're one of my top ones that I've been on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.